Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast.
Welcome back to the Ninja Selling Podcast. Matt and Garrett, we're back with you again. I'm excited to be sharing time with all of you. Matt, excited to be sharing time with you today. We are going to talk about inventory today. We're going to talk about what does this feel like, look like? What are we really up against? What is really happening out here when it comes to inventory? Before we jump into that, I just want to say that if you want to check out always anything about Ninja, you want to learn more about what it is that we talk about every single time we have a podcast, go to the Ninja Selling website, ninjaselling.com. You can learn about all upcoming classes. You can learn about our coaching program. You can learn about mastery in there and help yourself along the path as you are enjoying what we are talking about and what we talk about and share about every time we get a chance to be with you. You can also go to our Facebook group, the Ninja Selling Podcast group on Facebook. We have literally like 9,000 people in there now. Like we are like coming up quickly on that number.
We're like a real Facebook group.
It's like a real honest to goodness Facebook group. And again, I was in there the other day, and the communications around a recent podcast that we just did and the feedback and how people were interacting, I just love it. So I appreciate you all. Yeah, let's keep that group growing and keep it as awesome as it currently is. So Matt, inventory.
This is fun.
Yeah. I brought this topic up to you because it's interesting to watch how fast people freak out when the inventory levels start to rise. And I started to think about this in some different ways and trying to kind of like wrap my head around like an analogy that like would kind of make it all make sense. Because I've been in marketplaces with 34 months of inventory. I've sold real estate in markets of 34 months of inventory. And people are like, man, inventory is really starting to grow right now. I'm like, well, what's it at? And they're like, 2 months, maybe a little over 2. Like it maybe touched 3 and now it's back down to 2. I heard that the other day. And it's like, all right. Like, and then we start talking about other conversations, which is like, well, how are properties selling right now? Oh, there's properties definitely hanging on the market. We're seeing price reductions. And they always follow it up with, if a home is priced right and if it's positioned correctly and it has all the right stuff done, those are still getting multiple offers. Oh, interesting. Okay. So let's circle back around here and talk about inventory for a second. And then Matt, I'm going to let you jump in on my idea here. I started to think about like a speedometer. And as you increase speed in a car, let's just say inventory level, we've been sitting at around 10 miles an hour is where we've been here for the last couple of years. All of a sudden, we speed the car up to 20 miles an hour. It's 100% increase.
You doubled your speed. Whoa.
It's 100% increase from what you've been driving around at for a while at 10 miles an hour and just kind of doing that. You take that and you bring it up to 30, you take it up to 40. We haven't even gone there yet. We're not even at that place yet. 60 miles an hour on this gauge is what we would look at in the marketplace as the difference between a buyer's market and a seller's market. We're not even there. We're not even close. And what you're going to see until we hit 60 miles an hour is the opportunity to put a home on the market, price it correctly, stage it correctly, make it look awesome. And there's a potential there of, what do you mean? It sells quickly and they get their price they wanted and those people move along. We're still in this marketplace and I'm finding people are latching on too strong, Matt, to the inventory rising. Things are going to sit a little bit longer. We're watching properties sit a little longer. I call BS. We need to not be okay with that. We have so much room in the seller's market still. And inventory stopped growing as far as I've seen.
Yeah. Well, and really, what does it matter anyway, right? I mean, you still have a job to do as a real estate agent, right? You still have to help these people get from where they are now to where they want to go. And I love this analogy because the percentages versus the absolute numbers in perspective do make a difference, right? You get comfortable with half a month inventory going 5 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you go to 10 or 15. Percentage-wise, it's a major leap. In absolute number perspective, it's not a huge leap, but it's enough for people to notice and say, whoa, what's going on? And we have to understand that we don't want people freaking out because that's when weird decisions get made. And what's also happening behind this is you have the headlines coming out. Like my wife texted me yesterday. I'm sitting here, I get off a coaching call and she's like, hey, I just saw in the news that the housing market's going to come to a screeching halt. And I was like, oh gosh, you have all of these headlines and people out there saying these things when it's like, hold on, let's just look at the numbers, right? Who knows what will happen? Is it possible that all of a sudden inventory we can go from 10, 15, 20 miles an hour to 60, 70, 80 in 1 month? It's possible. Is it likely? Maybe not. I don't think so.
Do you imagine what that would be? Do you imagine like what that would look like?
Like, how many homes would have to hit the market for that to happen? And you've said the caveat that people say is like, well, if people list their home this way, then they still get the multiple offers. And so I think there's two things that people need to look at in this rising inventory environment is what's happening with those pending contracts, which for the most part is in a lot of different markets. Everybody has their individual thing. But if you look at the trends, I would suggest that you're probably looking at similar contract activity as we have in the prior year's averages, right? So yes, it's not as active as it was last year. I get that. Last year was also insane. But we still have a lot of good contracts going on, but there's more homes being listed, which is why that inventory is rising. But how much more do we really need before we can start talking about prices really coming down? Because a 1 month decline, I was out talking to a client in Austin, which saw massive growth in inventory over the course of just 1 or 2 months. There was a period a couple months ago, it was just like in 1 week, boom, all of a sudden this inventory. And so I asked him, I said, well, what about the average sold prices? What's going on there? Oh, prices are coming down. I was like, but those are list prices. Like, well, yeah. What about the average? We don't have enough data yet, right? It was a very good answer.
That's always what you hear. Oh, we're seeing the list prices coming down. No. You stopped pricing with the appreciation. That's what happens. It's like flatten that line out a little bit. And really the prices, are they really coming down? And again, there are some markets, Matt, but again, it's based off of like 2 months worth of.
Exactly. Because he said, well, I don't have enough data yet. And we had the conversation, well, how many months of data do you really need to have before you can start to identify a trend? Now, it's always great to be in front. You always talk about, Garrett, the lily pads on the pond, right? Oh, well, hey, we're seeing that speedometer gauge start to go from, 10 to 15. These are the lily pads on the pond. Yes, they might be. But here's what we're trying to do with that information is not then predict what's going to happen. It's handling that information to help our buyers and sellers make the best decisions possible for them in that moment, which doesn't mean telling people to wait, doesn't mean telling people to act now or anything like that. First, we have to understand their situation, right? So how many months of data do you need, Garrett, for a trend? I would say more than 1 or 2 months. And you also have to factor in a little bit of seasonality and what actual inventory is selling. Because if I look at sold prices coming down over a period of 1 or 2 months, well, what's the products that were being sold? Were there any outliers that might have been, making that happen? In an environment with inventory so low, when we're traveling at this 5, 10, 15 mile an hour, outliers have a much bigger impact on average and median prices than they do when we have higher rates of things going on. So that was the thought process that came through my head, Garrett. Sorry for bringing us kind of on a little windy road there, but it's kind of like the real estate market. Here we are.
But what you just said is really powerful. Like when you're operating at a very small number of units, what happens is a small change in that feels drastic. If we're sitting here at 34 months of inventory and all of a sudden we lost 5 months of inventory, nobody would even notice it. It would just be this like, oh yeah, we're down to 29 months of inventory is what we're currently sitting at right now. Doesn't change a damn thing in the marketplace. But when we're down at this level that we're currently in right now, these little changes feel drastic. And they're like, huge whacks of like, oh my gosh, what's going on? You brought up seasonality and the lily pads in the pond. I'm going to come back to that because like last 3 months, Matt, everybody started coming out going, change. We're watching this change happen. Oh my gosh, contracts are starting to slow down. Showings are starting to slow down. Inventory is starting to rise. And I've been sitting here going like, it's the first summer people have had in 3 years. Like it's the first time they're getting to go to family reunions. It's the first time they're getting to go see their family members. It's the first time all this stuff is happening. Like we don't really get to make a decision over like a massive market change in direction until everybody comes back. When everybody comes back after summer, because of how drastic, I've been calling this the summer of Spinal Tap, and I hope that makes sense to everybody. Because like your summer got turned up to a level 11. Like,
yes,
we're going big. Why do we have 11 on there? Because it's louder. Like, it's just better. Like, that's why we do it. That's what this summer has been. It's been like, let's crank this summer up to 11. Let's go big. And everybody, every person I coach is like, everybody's gone. Everybody's on vacation. Like, if I go to call all my people, they've all been traveling. This is consistent everywhere. So then you have the seasonality piece. You make a whole bunch of predictions and we start talking to our clients about the different direction this marketplace is going in. And you just keep watching the lily pads in the pond. You watch them make this change, more and more get added in. You keep gathering more and more data, looking at all the facts, all the information. And at some point, you will be able to make an educated decision on what's happening and what's moving forward here. A lot of us have been making decisions without enough data, without enough info, without enough stuff. Because again, I go back to, oh, you put a home on the market and you price it correctly and you stage it and you make it look pretty and you do all the right stuff and it sells with multiple offers. Every single marketplace currently right now that I'm helping people in, they will tell me about all the kind of people that are sitting in the slowing market. And then they'll throw in this little kicker at the end with like, oh, but homes are selling really fast if. Well, that tells me that we have a marketplace and buyers are there. If we do the right stuff, okay, well, just do the right stuff. Like everybody out there, just let's all consistently do the right things. The buyers are there.
Yeah. So with this inventory gauge too, I want people to think about it. What's interesting is this podcast is going to be released 2 weeks after we record this. So you might all be hearing this and going, what? Because it could change that quickly. It'd be like, wait, what? Talking about that. But I think it becomes interesting. People don't watch this gauge, right? I think until it's all of a sudden something that I might want to pay attention to, and then we don't understand it properly. So I think this gets into like, we should encourage people. I am encouraging you to watch this over time, right? Start looking at this stuff. And somebody had asked in the podcast group, hey, I haven't been tracking market stats really since 2020, which you should be tracking these all the time. What should I be looking for now in this market? And I'm always with the same stuff. It doesn't matter what market it is. New listings, pending contracts, first and foremost, right? Because that's giving you instant realized demand and instant active supply, new supply, right? Which is going to give you the best interpretation of what is going on right now. Then you go into your absorption rate, which is actually made from those numbers, basically, although it includes closings, which is you need time periods to track that. That can't be like, the absorption rate the past week. That's not good enough. You need like 6 months. And then median sold prices, right? Those are the 4 stats that I say very simply, that's going to help you really understand and give you a great interpretation of, well, what does this speed mean? If I look at all those stats and compare that to, which that absorption rate is of the gauge, by the way, months of inventory. If I look at all that and say, hey, here's where we're at the gauge, I can start to make predictions or help people understand what's happening so they can make the best decisions for them in the moment versus using headlines. Like the latest one last week, Garrett, was, the housing market's going to crash because mortgage interest, the interest in mortgages, I guess, hit a 22-year low. The demand for mortgages, probably a better way to say it. My language is not working out right now.
Sounds good.
And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, it's at a 22-year low. So when's the last time we saw mortgage rates climb the way they did over this past year? Well, if we go back to 1998, right? We saw mortgage rates over the 2-year period from 98 to 2000 go from just under 7 to 8.5. That was the last major. I mean, there was a little blip back in like 2012 from 3.5 to 4.5, but that was the last major like significant climb in interest rates. Which what happens when interest rates climb? Refinancing goes away. What do mortgage companies do? A whole lot of refinances. So
just go a little bit deeper in the data. All you have to do is go a little bit deeper in the data and like, what's causing this headline?
And what does it have to do with our inventory gauge? Because inventory has to do with the act of buying and selling properties. It has nothing to do with refinancing. So that headline and trying it, oh my goodness, the real estate market's going to crash. Like what part? As a real estate agent, the refinances really don't impact you much. okay, we could talk about macroeconomic things and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to watching your inventory gauge and how that impacts, it's minimal. It's like putting, I don't know, Garrett, maybe you go from a 32-inch tire to a 33-inch tire. It's going to affect your gas mileage a little bit. It's going to change the way your gauge reads a little bit, but not by a lot.
Not by a lot.
I don't know if that's a fair comparison.
But I think that, again, that's the thing that everybody needs to look at is like we can get so stuck with the data and what's being shared out there. And it's just keep it simple, but have these data points, as you're saying, Matt, that you come back to and you check on regularly. And if you look at these data points every month, you kind of just write them down. Go check your inventory levels, check your amount of pendings that you had in the last month, do your average for absorption for the last 6 months to kind of get a sense of what's going on there. And when you put those numbers side by side, month after month after month, the beauty is you can sit down with your current seller or your current buyer and be like, this is the trends that we're currently watching here right now. This is the direction that things are going in. Currently right now, we've had 100% increase. I mean, I would say it to my sellers and my buyers. We just went through 100% increase in inventory,
which helps them paint the picture of patience.
And let's talk about what 100% increase in inventory means when you're this low, when we've been this low for so long. We're still in, and this is where I want people to really take away from this. We're still in a really strong seller's market. But because of this 100% increase, everybody thinks that we've like been blasted in to this new realm. And it's like, no, things have just changed in pattern here a little bit. 6 months is still a neutral marketplace. At 6 months, when we get to that 60-mile-an-hour range, you can expect for people to be saying, wow, properties are hanging out a fair amount of time. I'm pricing them correctly. I am done all the right stuff. And we're still accumulating days on market. It's not just flying off the shelf. But those are the first ones to go still. They're still the first ones to leave, and they're the first ones to exit the building. But it's not going to be that like feeding frenzy at all. It just won't exist for the most part in the 6 months, unless you have an outlying, crazy, weird property.
Right. Yeah, but that's an obsolescence discussion more than a market discussion. And, Garrett, with this inventory gauge too, I think maybe a lot of people who are in the industry have not experienced a 5 month or a 50 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour, 70 mile an hour type of market, that 5, 6, 7 month of inventory. So there's a lot of agents out there that may be looking at, oh, we're going into this buyer's market. Well, hold on. Let's understand what that means, because when it's a true buyer's market, prices have been declining for a good period of time. And buyers are able to acquire properties at some pretty significant discounts, or the price reductions are just incredibly massive. We're not seeing that right now. Are we seeing buyers get to negotiate a little bit? Absolutely. That can happen in any market. Just because a seller offers an incentive or a builder brings back some type of incentive doesn't necessarily mean all of a sudden the buyers have complete control. That's just how people maintain a healthy marketplace in general. I mean, when have you seen products on the shelf that are great selling products all of a sudden go on sale because they just want to get it off the shelf? Not because all of a sudden it's switched to a buyer's market for that product. It's like, we got to clear this out for the new stuff, right? Because we got something even bigger and better that's going to happen that everybody's going to love even after they buy this. And that's where I feel like we're at as a market, which actually provides great opportunity for sellers and listing agents to figure out, okay, what's going to be our strategy to really make this property shine and easy to buy so that the buyers do want to just jump on this and we get the price that we want. It's a strategy that creates results versus, oh, we're losing money. It's just not there.
Well, and to sit down with your sellers and be able to show them like, oh, by the way, if everything's done right now, this is the activity that we are seeing happen. We just saw it happen last week. This is a property that went on the market. Show it to them. Look at how clean it is, how awesome it is. This one sold quickly. Like, we have two directions here that we can go right now. Because we're still in a seller's market, that is an opportunity for us. It's in our back pocket. If you want to work with me and we want to do the right stuff, we can make that happen. On the flip side over here is if you do the wrong stuff right now, this is a reality of what can happen right now in this marketplace. And again, still a seller's market. We still have that option in our favor. Matt, you were talking about when you cross into the buyer's market, like all of a sudden we see price reductions and things like that. I will soften that just a little bit, because you can get up to 6, 7 months of inventory and have it be a very, very, very healthy marketplace of back and forth, where it's not like, oh, we got to give this thing away to be able to sell it.
Absolutely. No doubt. It's not like a switch gets flipped. Like there's no, all of a sudden it's like turning out the lights in a room with no windows. It's not like that.
At 30 plus months of inventory, when I was, sold my home in that marketplace, it was like, yeah, people walk into that house. They walked into our house going, you're giving this thing away. And I was like, but you know what? I was sold in 30 days and we were gone. And when they said giving it away, it was a $260,000 house in Grants Pass, Oregon. We had it on for $350,000. We put it on for that. And we literally were like $15,000 below what they were saying we could have sold it for. I'm like, in 34 months of inventory, guess what? Here's the 15 grand that I could have had, and we're going that way.
This is the thing. It's like, it's nothing. That's real money, but in the grand scheme of things, to get you to where you want to go, to have the life that you want to have, you're in a good position. Garrett, I was thinking as you were talking about that, Tim made a great point when we had him on just last time talking about Focus First, is all of this data is to help set the stage for the client so they understand what they're up against, so that we can create a strategy that helps them win in that market. And I think that, as you said, showing the sellers, hey, we've seen a 100% growth in inventory. Here's what that means, I think is a great thing that we should be doing versus just saying, here's where the inventory is at. And because then people are deducing their own conclusions from that without seeing the reference. So if someone listening to this who's good with graphic design wants to create a little speedometer gauge, or maybe a tachometer would be a good, well, speedometer is probably better.
I was thinking actually the tachometer would be a better one, because when you think of speed, people think of like, oh, there's more activity as things get up to 100 miles an hour or 340 miles an hour, like what I've been using as an example of.
Well, maybe from a buyer's perspective, it's like, sweet.
We have how many homes we're going to go look at today? 40 homes we're going to go look at? Oh, geez.
Just broke the land speed record by a lot. Well, tachometer or speedometer, maybe looking at both and figuring out what makes sense from a seller's perspective. Maybe a tachometer would be kind of best, because like most engines now redline somewhere around that 6.5, 7,000 as we get into these turbocharged engines versus those naturally aspirated like V12s that you could redline all the way up at 9.5. Oh. Anyway, if somebody wants to take on the task of creating an inventory gauge, I think that would be a really cool visual that you could actually then show your sellers, be like, hey, here's where we were at. Here's where we are. By the way, here's redline, right? Now, that doesn't mean that things aren't changing. That doesn't mean we aren't burning more fuel. We aren't having to do more things. We're not stressing the engine here at 4 and 5, but redline's up here. We're still down here. Here's what we need to do to handle that.
If I was to create this gauge, I would make a red line, let's say at 12,000. I would put 6 right at the top of the wheel.
We're getting into good old naturally aspirated engines here.
Oh yeah, this is a naturally aspirated. We don't need any turbos in this economy right now. We're going to keep it just normal. But I think that if you were to because you could literally draw it on the gauge. You could literally draw the little, the arm out and be like, this is where we're currently at right now. You can use a different highlighter or a different color and be like, hey, this is where we were at. This is the change that's happened, where all the news and media is running around going, oh my gosh, this is what's happened. This is the increment change that we've had. It's not terribly far. This is where you lose your power as a seller, right here, and draw a line straight up. This is where it changes. Right now, you have a lot of room in here to still be really successful, but you need to do the right stuff. And then this is where you can show there are properties out here that are collecting days on market or not selling right now. It doesn't mean you're 100%. It doesn't mean that you got like it's all just easily just going to fall into your lap. We got to do the right things, but you got to paint this picture for them so they understand where we're at in this market right now. And you as agents need to understand and not freak out. Because I'm watching some people go like, and there's a lot of people in offices right now that have gone to freak out mode. They've been in freak out mode, and they're going to be looking for new jobs here coming up because they're just so latched on this change that's happened instead of going like, well, what does this change really mean? And this is where you have to get kind of a grasp of reality of what's here and not freak out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, so if we're going to go to 12,500, if anybody wants to just have some fun, the highest revving naturally aspirated car out there is Gordon Murray's T50 hypercar, which redline, I believe, at 12,100. So there you go.
A little technical data there if you're going to be making your tachometer for the inventory level here.
I think this is a good thing. So hopefully, Garrett, this whole, I mean, we went to a couple different directions, mostly at me just having squirrel moments here today. But overall, I hope that everybody got a really good sense of what we're talking about here in terms of the inventory gauge and really just understanding that percentage changes versus actual changes. And what does that really mean for our sellers and marketplaces and timelines right now? And it's not major changes. It just feels like it. And so let's look at that inventory gauge. Let's share that with our clients. Let's talk about it. Explore it more if you need to understand it better too. I mean, I will say, like, I've been looking at more and more data to really understand myself. Hey, what do these changes mean? How can I kind of look at this and say what needs to happen, particularly as someone who's going to be putting his home on the market in the next month or so? So
you're putting your home on the market?
Yeah, well, everybody knows that I'm getting a new house, right? I've talked about that before.
I thought you were going to keep yours as a rental.
Well, I was thinking about that. I might do that still, but there's a lot of numbers that we run with that, right? What can we rent it for versus what we sell it for? Take that equity, buy another investment property instead.
Dude, I'm just telling you right now, everybody I've ever talked to said, I wish I never sold that house. I'm just going to throw it out there.
I totally agree.
And you're going against all the data right now.
I'm going against the surveys, but here's the thing.
No, I'm talking about real people.
Well, this is the numbers that I put together for those of you who are interested. This is what I'm analyzing, and we might list it both ways. But I'm looking at, okay, what is the cash flow and other types of metrics that we look at from a rental property with this versus selling this, taking that equity and putting it into a less expensive house and having it cash flow the same, right? Now, the appreciation growth might be different, but it also might afford us the opportunity to start spreading that money out across different projects in the investment world. So that's the decisions that we're running through. There's a few features that we've put in the house that I think would do better in a sale situation than a rental situation in terms of the value achieved from it.
Like turning your garage into an office?
Yeah. As a rental, I mean, cool. As a sale feature, oh yeah.
In California, that would be turned into a grow room overnight, just so you know. Not saying that I would do that.
Which as a rental, not something that I want to deal with in South Carolina where it's not illegal, but so yes, that's the thought process going through for those of you who are interested. So stay tuned on that, I guess, as well. Okay. So there it is. I think we've put a bow on this one for those of you who are still with us and have not checked out our Facebook community. Head over to facebook.com/group/the Ninja Selling Podcast. If you have never been to an installation or not really sure what the next step on the path for Ninja is, head over to ninjaselling.com. You can watch a really fun video that actually explains the entire Ninja path. And you can also click on the calendar button to see when there are upcoming installations. And I highly recommend sorting by public installs because that's where you'll be able to get into unless your company is hosting a private install. A lot of people in the Facebook community have been saying, hey, reach out to the people who are hosting. You might be able to get into privates. Please do not take that approach because there is a whole different thing that goes along with private installations than public installations. If you have any questions about installs, direct it to the team at Ninja Selling. So click on the contact button on the ninjaselling.com page and reach out to them directly versus going directly to these brokerages hosting the installs because there needs to be continuity with what's going on with private internal installs and people who aren't part of that company. So I'll just put that out there. And if you guys have any interest in learning more about coaching and what we do, that's also available at ninjaselling.com, or you can head over to ninjacoaching.com. It'll redirect you right to the Ninja Coaching page there. I think I hit everything.
You did great, man. That was really well done.
I appreciate you, Garrett. I really love this topic that you brought to us and appreciate everybody listening. Very grateful for each and every one of you. I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic day today, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks, everyone.
If you enjoyed today's episode and would like more, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com.
There you will also find links for more information about ninja selling and coaching. Have an incredible day.